Promise. Written, well, by me, actually. You can find this on my AO3 if you decide to read it. This is basically a canon rewrite from the Malfoy Manor scene in Deathly Hallows Part 1. What if Harry didn't let go of Draco and took him with them? Draco might be a little more Gryffindor-ish than he first thought. He blames Harry for all of these feelings. Chapter 1. At first, he almost didn't feel it. It was barely there. A little pop of something pushing weakly against his shields. Something that he could easily bat away with his hand had he had the thought to do so. But staring into those truly beautiful eyes, seeing the intensity of his gaze, the way that now, kneeling this close to him, so they were a mere few centimeters away, so close that he could see the sunlight yellows and the earthy browns that crisscrossed pleasantly over his gaze. He knew what it was. It was pathetic, really, how the great Harry Potter thought he could get through his occlumency shields with something so pithy as a gnat of a Legolamens. Draco had spent the last 3 years turning his mind into a fortress, learning to protect his thoughts from any invasions that was not welcome. He had to, living in the same home as the Dark Lord and his deranged aunt and their entourage of fucked up Death Eaters. They were there now, watching him. His aunt with that crazy look as she pushed Potter's face closer to him, stretching that strung up and bulbous visage all the closer, in hopes to straighten his face out enough for Draco to recognize who it was. Of course he knew it was Potter. He had spent the last 6 years watching this stupid savior strut around school, watching those eyes fill with emotions, watching those lips stretch into a smile, a smirk, or a snarl. That nose bent a little to the side from last year. His smaller body in clothes that finally fit him, though they were drab and tacky still from whatever he had been doing these past few months. And his stupid, so fucking stupid need to save everyone. He didn't need to think twice. As soon as he saw the Weasel and Granger, he knew Potter wouldn't be too far behind. They wouldn't leave his side after all. Idiots, the lot of them. But they were going to save the world. They were the only hope anyone had left. This poor excuse for a boy before him, with his reddened eyes under the stinging hex, the way his dark skin had stretched to accommodate the bruises pulsing on his cheek, covering his eyes, his nose, and most of his mouth, distorting his features. Granger was very clever. He had to give her that. She was top of the school after all. And wasn't that a sting to him? But she forgot the one major thing that made Potter Potter. That goddamn scar. It was prominent even under all of that flushed flesh. He had heard about Horcruxes. It was hard not to overhear when the Dark Lord was being his usual intimidating self, lording over what was once his childhood home, boasting about his conquests in a graceful manner, lilting tales of his brilliance as they watched his pet snake tear away at yet another innocent person. It made Draco sick to his stomach at the thought of it. He hadn't been able to eat, to sleep, to breathe without thinking about the way that goddamn snake slithered around the house, keeping so close to her master's side, the way her fangs slicked out of her mouth, the way she hissed in that high-pitched Ophidian voice, the way she'd pounce again and again and again on her victims. Many of the victims were killed straight away. The Dark Lord always liked to cast the final spell and kill them, which was so fucking stupid. Draco would think to himself when he stayed awake at night, listening to the Dark Lord kill yet another Muggle or Muggleborn. It would be so easy to kill Potter, to get on his good side and dispel him in his sleep. But he was so vain in his need to kill him himself that he didn't see the big picture. But there were times when the Dark Lord didn't kill them, wanting to watch them suffer, watch as they writhed in pain. They were always so loud, those screams, those whimpers, those sickening slurps and crunches of being eaten alive as they were spelled still, helpless to move except to feel those fangs tear into them and the venom within them course through their bodies. He despised it. But after every death, once all the blood and guts and gore in the very dining table he had had breakfast, lunch and dinner on was either devoured or spelled away, one by one they would all leave, disapparating through the wards that once kept Malfoy Manor one of the safest places for him. The Dark Lord would call his closest to him, that simpering ratty man Wormtail by his feet, his Aunt Bella draped over his arm, and his father at his other side. His mother would stand up gracefully, holding a hand to Draco's back, waiting and wishing for the Dark Lord to let them leave without any consequences. This was when he would hear everything. The future plans, the past subjugations, and the stories. That's where the Dark Lord fucked up. The stories. Draco knew all about it, how he had sickeningly split himself up into so many pieces, Horcruxes, and how that scar, the one on Potter's forehead, the one that had always been there, the bane of his existence, that was a fucking Horcrux. And the only way to kill the Dark Lord once and for all was to destroy those Horcruxes. Which meant Harry Potter would have to die. Or at least that part of him. The part that made him a Horcrux. There was again that little poke of something trying to niggle its way through his occlumency shields. Pathetic Potter. Still the saviour even when he was this close to death. Did he not know that Draco had his life in his hands right now? He could easily squeeze it until it bled, until he begged, but that would mean this darkness, this hell, would spread all over. And Draco didn't want that. He didn't want this. None of this. He didn't want his home, the place he grew up, the place he felt safest, the place filled with his mother's laughter and his father's proudness to be tainted. His home. This was his home. And that evil, evil, evil man had taken it and molded it into this dark, bleak house, barren of the good times, of the laughter, of the hopes and dreams he had built here. They were here now, his aunt looming over them as she pushed Potter down to the floor, his father's grip tight on the back of his neck, squeezing him tightly as he muttered to him on how they would be forgiven, how they would be in the Dark Lord's favour if Draco could identify Potter. His mother stood far back, watching, waiting on bated breath. She had always coddled him, and he had loved her so dearly for it. Her hand immediately on his back as she calmed his father down from his outrage. His father was the Lord of Malfoy Manor no longer, but he still played as if he were, as if he had any sense of power here. No one did. No one but him and Potter.